Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of ninaribena's Art Journal Prompts and More. It's week 3 and so time for me to do another calendar page. I say this every month. If you don't want to join in with the calendar prompt, feel free to do an artist trading card, a tag, an art journal page, just replace it with something else. As long as it follows the prompt, then that's absolutely fine. Now the prompt this week is what's outside. For us here in the UK, we are well into spring and there's just so much inspiration outside. The wildlife, the flowers, the trees, there's so much colour in the gardens, in the fields. And for those of you that are further afield, you might be coming into your autumn season. Again, the changing of the leaves, there's lots of inspiration. If you are in an urban area and don't have access to a garden or what have you, then look at the buildings outside of your windows. You can interpret this however you see fit. Now, I am going to be using these colours here today. I've got 2 fluorescent colours. These are fabric paints, the Craft Artiste. I've got the orange and the pink. I've also got a pale blue. You can use fabric paints on paper. It works absolutely fine. I got these on clearance in TK Maxx a couple of years ago and they do need using up. I've also got turquoise. I absolutely adore this colour. This is the chalk finish. Gold, which I may or may not use, and Payne's grey for a little bit of contrast perhaps. Now, I am going to be working on watercolour paper. This is quite a thick watercolour paper because I don't want my my substrate to curl, because I'm going to apply the paints using a spatula and a palette knife. I'm just going to, I don't know, I was looking at the Gerhard Richter pieces that I did with the squeegee, and I don't know, I fancy doing something abstract for my background today. So this is what I am going to be using. So I'm going to put some paints down on this piece of palette paper and I'll be back. Now I start off by applying the paint with the spatula, but I don't stick with it. It's too thick. Most cake spatulas sort of come to a bit of a flat end, and this one doesn't, and it just isn't working for me. So I ditch it and just use the palette knife instead. But you can see that I'm starting off with this gorgeous fluorescent pink. I just absolutely love that colour, and I'm trying not to overthink what I'm doing. I'm being really random about this and just putting paint down where I see fit. I love how these colours work together, and as I did with the Gerhard Richter pieces when we did them with the squeegee, I'm moving my paper around as well, just so that I can vary those patterns and marks. Now I decided to put this onto speed and do a voiceover, because I do find when I'm creating pieces like this, they're very time consuming, and I just think it's suited better to putting it on slight speed and talking you through what I'm doing. Now, as I said when we were doing the squeegee paintings last year, if you're doing this kind of background, it's important to choose your colours wisely. You can see here that there's an awful lot of mixing of these colours, so you need colours that are going to play nicely together, because otherwise you really will end up with a horrible muddy mess. I've chosen blues and pinks because I've got a lot of pink in terms of flowers in my garden at the moment, so this is where the inspiration for this palette has come from. Now I'm overlapping the colours, and I'm also varying the pressure that I'm putting down on the palette knife as well. So I'm getting some really interesting colour blends here. The darker colour I'm using is Payne's grey, by the way. It's not black, it's more of sort of like an inky blue, and I just prefer that to black. I just think it's much softer. So I just carry on alternating the colours, overlapping them, and the important thing with this is just stop as soon as you get something that you like and you're happy with. Now if you don't want to use a palette knife, you could easily use a hotel room card for this, or a store loyalty card. That would work absolutely fine. here's my background. It's had a couple of hours to dry, and that's how it looks. And of course, me being me, couldn't stop, so I went on to do another one as well. This one's got gold in the background, and I use the orange as well, so you know, I love that. And I am going to cut these into ATC size now. Now, I'd planned to do this part of the video in real time and talk you through it so you can see my hands waving as I'm talking to you, but Sam and two of his friends walked through the door, and well, they were like a herd of elephants in the background, so off to the voiceover again. Now you can see here that I'm using some of the Creative Expressions mini stencils to add some more details to the background. This one is eclipse circles. I'll leave the details of what stencils I'm using on the screen for you. Now, because the background is already busy and I'm adding more details to it, I've said this to you before, the way I think to go with this kind of thing is to use colours that are already in your background, because it just makes it far more pleasing to the eye. You can really overdo it if you start adding a load more colours to this, whereas this just keeps everything in keeping. So this time I'm using my paintbrush protectors. These are the protectors that come on new paintbrushes, and you've seen me use these before. They're a really handy mark making tool. Now I want to emboss these birds as my focal image on this artist trading card, and I want them to sweep bottom right to top left, so I do this in 2 or 3 sessions. I'm using black embossing powder, so I'm just adding my embossing ink now, which I'm just stenciling on with a makeup sponge, and I'm going over it 2 or 3 times just to make sure that I've got enough ink, because of course these birds are quite small. And now I'm adding my black embossing powder, which I shall heat set with my heat tool before continuing to add the rest of the birds. And I just keep adding more and dotting a few around here and there until I'm happy with the layout. And I do end up with a few stray bits of embossing powder, and I just brush them away with a small paintbrush. You need to do this before you heat set, because once you've heat set it, it's there for good. I pop that card to one side for the time being. I do end up coming back to it and adding more details later. So my second card, I'm adding the focal images first. I'm using a bee stamp, and this is inspired by a nest of honeybees that we've got in our feather boards. So I put the one image in the bottom left hand corner and then one just hanging off the page. And again, I'm using black embossing powder for this. To keep the continuity on all 3 cards, I use the same black embossing powder. So time now to add some background stamping, and I'm using paint to stamp with just because I think it's much more vibrant than using inks, which wouldn't show all that well. So I've got this honeycomb stamp that I'm using in the top left hand corner. When you are stamping with acrylic paint, make sure you wipe it off straight away, because once it's dried on there, it's an absolute pain in the neck to get off. Trust me, I know. And again, for continuity, I'm using the paintbrush protectors. I just think it's nice to use elements of these same mark making tools in all 3 artist trading cards so that they really do look as if they're part of a set. So I'm putting that card aside for the time being and starting work on card number 3. So I'm using the Dilutions background stamp here to add some of the pale blue circles. I give this a dry before I come in with my focal image, which is a ladybird this time. At this time of year, we end up with so many ladybirds, and some of you will remember me posting on Facebook a couple of years ago where we just had a major swarm. The windows were covered in ladybirds. birds. My car was absolutely covered, and it was countrywide. Lots of other people were experiencing the same problem as well. So now I'm just adding some circles to the dots that I made using the fluorescent pink. So again, I'm using my paint brush protector to do this, and I just keep going backwards and forwards and just adding more details sort of, as I want to, and I do keep sort of alternating, I think, in the end as well between the three cards. I add a bit, start working on another, and then add a bit more. That's just the way that I like to work. And again, when you get to the stage where you really like the look of the card that you've created, then it's time to stop. I hear people comment all the time, when do you know when to stop? I think if you look at a piece and you still feel that something isn't quite right, that's when you need to continue. And when you look at it and you think, I absolutely love that, then you know that it's time to stop. I just felt that this card needed a little bit of pink just to brighten things up and to pull in the pink that you can see on the left hand side as well. And this was a really wise move. I just love how that pink stands out. It's just really pretty. Now, to me, doodles always look better when they're in odd groupings, so I tend to do mine in either 3s or 5s or 7 dots at a time, and I'm just focusing now on sort of, making sure that this piece flows so that your eye is drawn from sort of one area right around the artist trading card. Now, here they are, all 3 of them together, and I just feel that the thing it's missing now is just a little bit of white, just to help brighten things up a little bit. So again, I'm just using my crochet sticks just to add a few extra details. And I think you'll probably be able to see that just adding just a little touch of white to these really has made a really big difference. I mean, I loved it as it was before, but I just still had that feeling that something was missing, and a bit of white was all it needed. And I wanted to add a bit of white to the embossed images as well, so I'm just using this Prismacolor pencil here. I do resort to a Stabilo All pencil in white in the end because this still wasn't as bright as I wanted it to be, but you can see here that that has made a really big difference and has just helped those focal images stand out more off the background. So finally, just to finish things off, I'm just inking around the edges with some permanent black ink. I'm adding it with a makeup sponge, and to me this just frames the piece and draws your eye to the centre of the card. So here are my finished artist trading cards. I absolutely love these. I just think they're gorgeous. The colours are so pretty, all the details, just, oh, so much fun. I'm not even going to add a quote to these. I have tried. I've used some of the Tim Holtz Chit Chat words and they just don't look right. They honestly do look better without a quote, so I'm just going to leave them be. I haven't decided which one I'm going to use as my calendar page yet, so, you know, I'll let you know next month once I've made up my mind. Now let me just put these to one side for a second, because I know that I always get asked what stamps and stencils and things I'm using. Let me show you. This honeycomb stamp that you saw me use is an indigo blue stamp. The smaller honeycomb was in a set that was in a local magazine, so that's that. The Ladybird is a Paper Mania Urban Stamps. It came in a set of 4 or 5 ladybirds. In fact, here's the rest, 5 of them. And they were all joined together, and I cut it up just because, you know, I didn't like the way that they were laid out for once, and I just wanted to be able to use these individually. So that's Paper Mania Urban Stamps. This one was just a cheapy clear one from Hobbycraft, so that's that. Now, as far as the stencils are concerned, this one is Creative Expressions Mini Stencil, and this is Eclipse Circles. This one is a local company in Worcestershire called Fairy Dust Stencil, so they are UK based, and that's one that they cut them themselves. So that's Fairy Dust Stencils, and it is called Flock of Birds, I do believe. Here we go, flock of birds. So that's that. So if you look them up online, that's where that one came from. Then the stamp that I used was this one here, and that's from the Dilutions Basic Backgrounds. This is a really old set. This was the first stamp set I bought, so I don't even know whether this one is still available. And of course you saw me using my crochet hooks. These are crystallites, and they're called Red Heart crystallites. And the good thing about these for dot making is that the bottom is completely flat. Can you see that? And they come in a pack like this. I think it was £6 or £7, and you get 5 of them, as you can see. These are the bits and pieces that I've got left over. Now, you should be able to get 5 artist trading cards out of each of the backgrounds, but I cut them both differently. I'd planned it out as well. I'd measured it to see how I could get the most out of them, but on one of the cards I only managed to get 4, so you can see I've obviously cut it differently, because those are the leftovers from that set, and it was that one that I only got 4 out of. You can see I've got you know, far more leftover bits, whereas that's all I've got left from the one with the orange in. So I've got all of these gorgeous backgrounds that I can do something with at a later date. I think the pink ones are my favourites. I just love those. So just to recap, the prompt this month is what's outside. So have a look outside the environment that you're in and see what inspires you. Clearly for me, it was sort of everything I've seen during spring. The flock of birds, the bumblebees, the ladybirds. Really enjoyed doing this. So if you enjoyed the project that I did this week, as always, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, and do let me know what you think in the comments below. So take care everyone, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye for now.